Welcome, everyone. We're joined by Jack from Peter Stevens Motorworld. She's a really cool business owner. She has 9 car yards in 4 geographical locations, so she knows her stuff. I'm really excited for you to hear her journey because she's been working with her virtual team for 2 years now and it's developed over time. Welcome, Jack.
Hi, Carmen. How are you?
I'm very excited. So let's go back to 2 years ago when we first had a chat about the potential of you getting your first virtual team member. Where was your business at then?
Yeah, I can't actually. Firstly, I can't believe it's been 2 years. That time has flown. In terms of where was the business at, I think at the time I was probably getting involved in different areas of the business. So it was probably more about where was I at because my involvement and role in the business was expanding. So originally I was looking for somebody to help me very specifically with regards to some day-to-day marketing functions. So that was the beginning, I think.
Yeah. And so that's when we got Ernie on board. I remember in our first conversation, you're like, I want Facebook support. And whenever I hear that, I get worried. But you were really clear, like, this is the strategy, this is where he gets information, this is what he does. Like you knew what the strategy was. You just needed him to implement it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't need a strategist at all. I just needed someone to do what I did. That can be quite time consuming. And all credit to Ernie. So that we've been working with Ernie 2 years and he is now running our Facebook advertising campaigns, which I think had I said that to you 2 years ago, you would have been even more scared than
I said, you're
you
dreaming. I
were.
can't do that.
And had I said it to Ernie, I think he would have been extremely scared as well. Look, it's still very structured. Everything is still checked and reviewed by me, but the time consuming aspect of Facebook and our social media is all managed by Ernie now. And to give you some context on that, we have 32 social media pages, if you want to call them that. So across Facebook, Instagram, Google My Business,
Wow.
there's 32 different ones, all of which require different content, all of which have different advertising for different brands. And Ernie does a pretty good job of keeping across all of that.
So talk to me, like, what does Ernie do, day to day?
I think I'm going to tell you about the transition actually. When Ernie first joined, it was very structured around, this is the task. We had a Trello board, and each day, this is the very specific task that I need you to do.
Mm.
And his day was mapped out in a very structured way like that. Over time, as he has got more comfortable and confident with the social media side of things, especially, there he is talking to me on Slack, which is how we communicate with each other. As he has got more comfortable, actually, that social media role has grown. And some of those daily tasks we've dropped off, or we've said they're not really necessary, some of the reporting tasks. So now the majority of his time he is scheduling social media and he is building Facebook or Meta advertising campaigns.
Yeah, beautiful. And so that's the marketing stuff. So you got that under control. And then the next step was finance. So tell me a little bit about your needs around finance and what your team do around that.
So I had this crazy idea that I was going to completely restructure our finance department. um,
As you do.
as you do. Look, it had been a part of our business that we bought the business 8 9 years ago, and it was a part of the business that we'd never really looked at in any detail. It was kind of established when we bought the business, and it sort of chugged along. It was an area of the business where we could definitely improve significantly and definitely become more efficient and more effective. So we pulled it apart in terms of the processes. I started asking everyone. I'm very good at asking questions, and I'm not concerned that I don't know how something works. I'm quite happy to ask lots and lots of questions until I really understand it.
Yeah.
Um, and part of that process of restructuring that department was to say, okay, actually, 50% of this department can move offshore.
Yeah.
So let's achieve the same result. I think it probably started 2 years ago. Let's achieve the same result. It was a cost saving
Mm.
drive for a lower cost.
Yes.
Over the course of the 2 years, the business has grown quite significantly. So now it has become, actually, we need to achieve more. We're continuing to grow the offshore team in tandem with the onshore team.
Yeah. So the initial drive was cost savings. Now, as you're growing the offshore teams, like the cost savings are great, but it's really about responding to capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing how we can get the result that we want. And so now we have the confidence. We know that some of our VAs are the best performers in our finance team.
Wow.
And so we know that our offshore team performs as well, if not better, than our onshore team. So it's actually about saying what's the most effective way of growing the capacity of this team.
Yeah, I love how the focus has changed. And I know you've got two people in finance at the moment. You're looking at a third one, but like, let's tell people like the real story. It doesn't always, it's not always a smooth journey. Like I know that you had a person in finance for a period of time, and then things got a little bit rocky. Tell me the sort of things you noticed and around the decision to, make a change in that team member.
Yeah, we actually had two team members who didn't work out along the journey. And I think sometimes you're sticking with something because you actually don't know how good it could be.
Mm,
So you think, okay, well, this is as good as it can be, so we'll stick with it. And then a light gets shone that tells you, actually, no, it could be really, really good. At which point you go, oh, wait a minute, we need to make a change here. So a car sale is actually quite complicated in terms there are lots from an accounting perspective. There are lots of moving parts when you sell a car. And there are lots of different structures within that. And with the early VAs, we were kind of making an excuse that, oh, it's really complicated. So that's why
yeah,
things are slow. That's why we're not picking it up. But actually, it wasn't the car sale that was too complicated. It was potentially, there was some challenges there with attendance. We never quite knew when the VA was working, when they weren't working, and responsiveness. And I think whilst we thought the VA was putting the 8 hours in, maybe they weren't, and maybe that's why we weren't getting the results rather than the complexity. But
yeah,
there are probably there's some good warning signs. So the VAs that we have now are extremely responsive. So you can tell on Slack very quickly whether somebody's actually online working or not. And yeah, the VAs that didn't work out just didn't have that commitment or responsiveness.
Yeah, I just think that's really insightful. I know that in the early days of my business, I think I held on to some people for too long. But like you said, you don't know what you don't know until you know it, and you're like, oh, okay, like this is what I can expect.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we have in the onshore business in Australia, we have a 6 month probation period, and we have a very structured way of moving through that probation period, and reviews at 3 months and 4 months and 6 months. And we're not scared of letting people go because everyone needs to be doing their best.
Yeah,
And I think that was the crunch. It was with this particular VA, she wasn't really doing her best. She was turning up for the bare minimum.
yeah. And it's interesting when you speak about the warning signs you saw. The warning sign for me, I remember I was actually sitting on the couch back there and I just called you randomly one day and you're like, oh yeah, she's okay, but and then you just moved on to the next topic. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Can we go back to that lack of energy and that but? Like let's dig into that, shall we? But and I love it because often people go, oh look, I've tried virtual assistants before and it didn't work, and they'll just go, then they don't work. But you've gone again. You've now got an amazing team. You're continuing to grow your team. So like how has having virtual assistants both in marketing and finance impacted your business?
They're great people. So I think what's really important for me to remember a virtual assistant is no different to an employee, and it's just a remote worker. And you can have remote workers who work for you who are based in Australia, who are Australian, who don't show up. And you can have virtual assistants who don't show up, So I know there is this kind of fear, maybe, or this unknown about a virtual assistant,
Mm.
but fundamentally, it doesn't make any difference whether that person is in. I live in Victoria. It doesn't make any difference whether that team member is based in the Philippines or based in Cairns.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
It's
sense.
no difference. Yeah. In terms of showing up, in
Yeah.
terms of capability, in terms of attitude, they're all the things that make a great employee. You can
Mm.
teach anybody anything,
Yes.
um, but we're all the humans we are, and
Yeah.
it's the human, So, and the three employees we have now, they're all great at what they do. So that makes a
Yeah.
difference to our business, just like the guys in the workshop are great at what they do, and that makes a positive impact on our business.
Yeah, I love that. No, I love that. They're members of your team, just like anyone else in your business. And
Yeah.
how do you communicate with your team? And I know this might vary a little bit depending on departments, because I know that you've got a head of finance as well. So tell me a little bit about how the communication works with your virtual assistants.
We all communicate through Slack, and all of our virtual assistants, because they are part of the team, all have Peter Stevens Motorworld email addresses, and they are all part of the organization from a Microsoft perspective.
Mm.
So there's lots of email communication, there is lots of Teams meetings, and then ongoing, daily chat through Slack. I'd love to get Slack rolled out through the business. Um, but people who are used to working remotely work in a very different way. And we
Yes.
are, the rest of our business, you have to be on site. So they don't really kind of get the Slack thing. So,
Yeah, different communication strategies for each mode.
yeah,
And so, what have you learnt about yourself through this process?
I think I can go too fast for people. I have to catch myself sometimes because things that I think are obvious might not always be obvious.
Mm.
And so it's a really good, what's the word I'm looking for? Indicator for me. I have to just step back sometimes and go, wait a minute, is that obvious to anybody else? And that's what needs to happen. And I think the other thing about having a virtual team is because the team is remote, work happens in a different way. When
Mm.
somebody is in your organization, we have 100 employees in Australia.
Yes.
So just by showing up to work,
Mm.
work happens, right? Because
Mm.
you're physically there, and somebody
Yes.
says to you, "Oh, could you do this? Oh, could you do that?" And you become part of a team, and it organically can happen.
Mm.
With a virtual team, you have to structure that, because if you don't
Yes.
give that person any work to do and they're not front of mind, then they don't do any work. Understandably
Yeah.
so. So it really, the whole piece that I'm sure any business owner listening to of this has heard before, about whether you are working in your business or on your business, and whether you are actually using your time to best value. The virtual assessment process really shines a light on that,
Yes.
because you have to go, you start going, oh, do I need to do this? Oh, could I actually give this to somebody else to do? And I think it's something we spoke about 2 years ago,
Mm.
in terms of putting together what the assistants would do. It really shines a light on how much time do I spend working on the business, and how much
Yes.
time, how much of this busyness that is being
Mm.
created, which isn't really the best use of my time. But I can make myself very busy doing that. We all can. That's an ongoing learning process. And you go,
And I find it's ongoing because, you and I find new things that maybe we don't have to do, but also as our team grows stronger and is able to read our minds a bit more, then we're able to more efficiently and effectively hand over some of those things than we might have done on day one.
absolutely. Yeah. Once the team gets more confident, and marketing is obviously very different to finance, but for
Mm.
example, with Ernie, he can second guess me now or future guess me, whatever the
Yeah.
word is, whatever the right phrase is. And also, I can take him along to meetings and hand him up, and he'd say, "Can you just, can he run with that?" And he's comfortable doing that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And so, what advice do you have for people listening who are thinking about getting a virtual assistant but haven't quite got around to doing it yet?
Definitely just go for it. You don't know what you don't know. This could be pretty life changing for you and your business. And I think I'm going to use your advice there, actually, Carmen, which is spend a week observing yourself and just really thinking about, am I adding value to my business here, or am I just doing tasks? Because all of those tasks could be given to somebody else and you could be adding a whole lot more value to your business.
Yeah, for sure. I know for me, I try and structure my week so I have 3 days a fortnight where I'd actually have nothing scheduled because I know in that space often something amazing develops. Not always, but something amazing. So, like, I'm on a mission to get those tasks off my plate continuously.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't that to do with your brain? It's to do with left brain, right brain, and that when you
Yeah,
actually stop doing, the being creative side of your brain
yeah,
kicks in, which is when the genius happens. And like
yeah.
in the shower.
Exactly. When I go for a run, I have to send myself breathy
Yeah.
voice messages of my great ideas.
Exactly.
And so, Jack, I've really enjoyed listening to your story and your insights around how you've made it work, what you've learned about yourself, including some of the challenges you've had as well. So, if someone's listening and I know obviously you sell beautiful cars, but I know you also often get asked to speak at all sorts of beautiful places as well. So how can people contact you?
People are more than welcome to email me on Jack, which is a JACK, at peterstevensmotorworld.com.au.
Beautiful. So, Jack, thank you so much. Do you have any final words to finish with?
I think just go for it. Just put your big girl pants on and step into the world, because you can build a really powerful team at a fraction of the cost that you would pay for that team in Australia, and have a really positive impact on your business.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, Jack.
My pleasure. Thank you.